The Romans weren't big fans of the dark, which is understandable since they didn't have electricity and were convinced their nocturnal hours were full of demons, ghosts, witches, and evil spirits. So, if you were strolling home from the tavern late at night, or trying to sneak into someone's house after dark, watch out for these 10 weirdest ancient Roman nighttime superstitions. Number 10. Fear of the owl. Owls were considered the ultimate harbinger of doom in Rome, even more so than what they had in Greece. And it wasn't just because of their silent flight and ghostly hoots. It was because Romans believed that owls could only be seen at night and that they preferred the darkness because they were blind. To make matters worse, the great Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder claimed that owl droppings were toxic. But while scientists now know that these claims were unfounded, owls still do make a ghostly apparition in the night. And a person who saw one wasn't exactly in for good fortune. In fact, Pliny wrote that even hearing an owl hoot at night was a bad omen. Since they were thought to be creatures of darkness, Romans also thought that owls were intimately associated with witches, who used their feathers for their spells. Number 9. Cemetery whispers. Walking past a cemetery at night was something to avoid if you didn't want to become a ghost yourself. In fact, Romans believed that it was possible to pass on and become a ghost by simply walking through the gates of a cemetery. The only way to avoid this fate was to turn around and leave without making any noise. And don't think that being buried alive would help you either. That was a genuine fear among Romans, who believed that cemeteries were a place where the living could communicate with the dead. In their eagerness to make contact with loved ones who had passed away, some people would have their entombment delayed as long as possible, sometimes even several months. As you can imagine, this led to some premature burial, which inspired another popular superstition about zombies. Romans believed that witches could raise the recently dead. But in most cases, there was a simple explanation for these supposed zombies. They were usually slaves or beggars who were wandering around in a daze due to a blow to the head. Even so, people were so afraid of becoming undead themselves that they started carrying silver coins in their coffins. Supposedly, the corpse would clutch the money tightly in its hand if it tried to reanimate itself. No. 8. A full moon mischief. You may have heard that a full moon makes people go crazy, but the ancient Romans believed that it did much more than that. They thought that a full moon unleashed all sorts of hellish creatures into the world, including snakes, spiders, frogs, and even poisonous fish. It was also thought to be the reason behind a sudden outbreak of insanity and violence. Because of this, Romans believed that no important business should ever be conducted during a full moon, and that getting married under a full moon was a recipe for disaster. People took these superstitions so seriously that every year when the moon was full, a special officer called the Lupercal was appointed to watch the citizens of Rome. His job was to keep an eye out for anyone who seemed disturbed and to take them to a shrine dedicated to the goddess of the moon, Diana. This tradition continued until the 3rd century AD. Number 7. Beware of dreams. Romans believed that dreams were messages from the gods, and that made nighttime a very dangerous time because it meant that your fate could change in an instant. For example, if you had a dream about someone else dying, it was thought that you had killed them. Because of this, Romans often chose to ignore their dreams, because if their dreams were true, they would bring bad luck. If they were false, they would upset the gods. To make things even worse, certain dreams were thought to be a sign of demonic possession, and according to Pliny the Elder, the only cure for this type of possession was to sacrifice a piglet while having a dream interpreter stand over the body and chant a prayer. Number 6. Evil spirits. While we tend to think of ghosts as being more of a Halloween decoration nowadays, they were a serious problem for the Romans, who believed that ghosts were everywhere. One of the worst places to encounter a ghost was at home. After all, that's why they say home is where the heart is. And Romans believed that the heart was the source of a person's soul. Because of this, the entrance to the house was treated as sacred. Upon entering, everyone had to announce their presence by saying, "Beware, I am here." Visitors would then wait for a reply before proceeding further. If there was no response, it meant that the spirit of the house did not welcome them. In that case, they would have to turn back and come again later. Even knocking on someone's door after dark was considered risky because Romans believed that doing so could allow evil spirits to enter their home. Because of this, people wouldn't even knock on doors. Instead, they would simply stand in front of them and wait for someone to open up. This was especially true in Pompeii, where a visitor might wait up to half an hour before someone opened the door. Of course, this wasn't always the best way to get inside a house, as you can imagine. There were plenty of arguments and fights that broke out this way. Number 5, ghost dogs. If you were walking down the street and suddenly heard the sound of a dog barking, don't go investigating. Instead, you should have turned tail and run the other way as fast as you could. Why? Because Romans believed that ghosts could use dogs as a vessel to appear in the physical world. They also believed that seeing a ghost dog was a sign that someone close to you would die soon. 4. Fear of the number 17. If you were invited to dinner on Friday the 13th or any other date that included the number 17, you probably wouldn't be too excited about it. But the Romans felt the same way about the number 17, although it wasn't nearly as widespread as today. It was considered an unlucky number because the soothsayer had predicted that Julius Caesar would meet his demise on the Ides of March, which fell on the 15th. However, this wasn't the real reason that Romans were afraid of the number 17. That came later. During the reign of the Emperor Nero, he put 17 senators to death, and that made the number extremely unpopular. Number 3, no baths at night. Taking a bath was considered one of the height of luxury in Roman culture, and the public baths were one of the central parts of Roman life. However, taking a bath at night was never a good idea. This was because of the black swimming hole theory, which held that there was a huge monster living in the Tiber River that would drag people underwater and eat them. This myth may have originated from a misinterpretation of a mistranslation of the Bible. According to Revelation, the beast from the depths is unleashed after the death of the Antichrist. But for the Romans, this became the beast from the Tiber. The truth is, this river was dirty enough that anything lurking in its depths was probably better off staying underwater. It was filled with all manner of waste and dead animals, and the water was undrinkable. However, this didn't stop people from bathing in it. In fact, the Tiber was the main water source for the city of Rome, so everyone was pretty much swimming in filth. Number 2, magic spells. Practicing magic in Rome was illegal and extremely dangerous. The practice was closely monitored by the emperor and laws were established to crack down on suspected sorcerers. In fact, a person could be charged with practicing magic simply for treating someone with herbal medicine. People accused of sorcery were put on trial and given the option to plead guilty or die. And that's why you shouldn't cast any spells in Rome. And yes, that includes love spells. While Romans didn't necessarily believe that love spells were evil, they did think that they were meddling in the affairs of the gods. Love was supposed to be brought about by Cupid, and any attempts to interfere with that process was a punishable offense. Number 1, the harbingers of death. The Romans believed that the appearance of certain natural phenomena signaled the imminent death of someone important. For example, if a red or white rooster appeared anywhere in public, people assumed that it was a bad omen. If it crowed during the day, it meant that a senator would die. If it crowed at night, it meant that an ordinary citizen would die. Similarly, if a lion was spotted in the wild, it was a sign of an approaching tyrant. And if it appeared in a dream, it meant that someone was about to be exiled. This may seem ridiculous, but these beliefs persisted for centuries, and the last thing you wanted was to be responsible for the death of an important Roman. Now check out the weird ways ancient Rome dealt with mental illness, or click this other video instead.